Just make sure. Okay, awesome. All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our Zoom colloquium. I'm honored to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Olarotimi Ogungbemi. He is a highly respected researcher at the University of Texas at San Antonio, whose work focuses on environmental justice, rhetoric, climate politics, and environmental stewardship. With over a decade of teaching experience in Nigeria, where he has specialized in English studies, Dr. Ogungbemi extends across linguistics, discourse analysis, and sociolinguistics. As a fellow of the American Council of Learned Societies, his scholarship bridges local and global discussions, contributing valuable insight into how community voices can be integrated into climate adaptation and policymaking. Dr. Ogungbemi's academic career reflects a deep commitment to amplifying marginalized voices in environmental discourse, ensuring that the most vulnerable communities are heard in the fight against climate change. His research not only advances theoretical understandings, but also has tangible impacts on real-world environmental politics. He regularly engages in international scholarly debates and brings a crucial perspective to the intersections of environmental justice and linguistic representation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ogungbemi.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Excited to be here, and I'm also happy that many of my teachers are here. Dr. Walker, Professor Drinker, Professor Kells. I've benefited from their wealth of experience, as they continue to guide me, in my scholarship. So I'm excited to be here once again, and today I'll be presenting on extraction industries and environmental impacts. But this time around, although we don't have that in the original title, I'm going to contextualize this and use Nigeria as my case studies. I'm from Nigeria, and that's the world I've known for so long a time that I wouldn't want to shy away from what is happening over there. So permit me to would you please make me a co-host so that I can share my screen? Thank you. Just a moment. All right. The title once again is Extraction Industries in Nigeria and Indigenous Community Environmental Impacts. And my positionality is deeply informed by my lived experience in the Niger Delta. I'm from a state called Ondo State in Nigeria, and it's one of the 9 states that make up, the Niger Delta region in Nigeria. And there, I witnessed, growing up, I witnessed, firsthand the profound negative transformation of the region's ecosystems, and growing up in such a region and conducting research in Nigeria too, I became acutely aware of the socio-environmental challenges faced by marginalized communities, challenges that eventually sparked my commitment to environmental issues and indigenous community advocacy. So as a researcher grounded in environmental rhetoric, discourse analysis, and digital storytelling, I'm trying to develop a broad understanding of these issues, particularly in the Niger Delta and by extension in Lagos City or Lagos State in Nigeria, where oil extraction and pollution have left a trail of devastation. I subscribe to post-colonial framework or theories, and this has informed my work, tracing the threads of historical and ongoing inequalities that intensify environmental degradation across African context, but particularly in Nigeria. In Lagos, for example, the legacy of colonial land policies continue to shape contemporary urban and environmental challenges, often with severe consequences for marginalized communities. And I did my first PhD in English linguistics, particularly in discourse analysis, critical discourse analysis. And then I was interested in investigating how media, frame Boko Haram terrorism and the displacement of communities affected by Boko Haram in Nigeria. That's just for the background. And for my talk this evening, here's an overview of the talk. So I'm going to start with context and background of extraction industries in Nigeria, and proceed to environmental and social impacts on indigenous communities. But as we discuss some of these impacts, then some of the case studies that we're using, will also be engaged. Then moving on from there, I'll be talking, about community engaged research methods and why, I think they matter. And I'll also be asking the audience, to guide me in how I can use these, for my ongoing research work. Yeah, because I'm also, I'm a PhD student at the University of Texas in San Antonio, where I'm working on issues of flooding, water resources in Lagos, and how this affects local or indigenous communities. And so now let's start with a map of Nigeria. Let's see what Nigeria looks like. Nigeria is a country in West Africa, and it has 36 states, and the Federal Capital Territory, which is Abuja. So Abuja is located in northern Nigeria, and Lagos used to be the Federal Capital Territory until it was moved in 1991 to Abuja. But then today, my talk would concern, states, about 9 states plus Lagos, making 10 states, in southern Nigeria. These are located in the south of Nigeria. Lagos is located somewhere around here, and my state, Ondo, where I'm from, is here. So the Niger Delta states are located around here, but then we're going to see a map of the Niger Delta, the region itself, that shows clearly, these 9 states that I'll be engaging, in my work. So this the map of the Niger Delta. So yeah, this is the map of the Niger Delta, where we have Ondo, Edo, Delta, Bayelsa, Rivers State, Imo, Abia, and Akwa Ibom. So these are the states known as the Niger Delta. But then, since oil prospecting has not stopped in Nigeria, we have also discovered crude oil in commercial quantities in other states. And one of such discoveries happened in Lagos recently. Then in northern Nigeria too, in addition to mining that is taking place over there, we have also discovered crude oil in northern Nigeria. So they are yet to explore those ones in northern Nigeria. So Nigeria's economy is deeply reliant on its oil, gas and mining sectors. And since the discovery of oil in the Niger Delta in the 1950s, these industries have become the backbone of the country's economic landscape, contributing significantly to Nigeria's gross domestic product and forming a substantial portion of government revenues. So in addition to oil, mining activities, like I said, particularly for gold and other valuable materials, have also witnessed notable growth. But then that is in northern Nigeria. But what this solidifies is that Nigeria depends on resource extraction, for economic development. Now, this extraction of oil, for economic growth comes with environmental cost. And that's why the oil, the gas, and mining sectors have spawned, economic growth in Nigeria. This development, comes at a severe environmental and social cost, and which is disproportionately borne by indigenous and rural communities. So resource-rich regions like Niger Delta, suffer the brunt of this burden as decades of oil spills, gas flaring, and land degradation have devastated local ecosystems. And these environmental impacts, which include water pollution, deforestation, and the loss of arable land, threaten the health of the environment At the same time, it undermines the traditional livelihoods of the people who depend on farming and fishing. And this also led to social tensions, conflicts, displacement, as communities struggle to reconcile their need for survival with the destructive consequences of resource exploitation. Now we have, two images here, illustrating the environmental cost, of oil extraction in the Niger Delta. This is a picture taken from a community known as Goe, in Rivers State in Nigeria. And we see dead fish, in their rivers. We see the land has become, so polluted that it's a shame that even people will still, go into such land. And this has, like we said, implications, for them health-wise and so, environmental-wise. Now, we're going to see a video, although this video is about 12 years old, but then this video still reflects, current realities, contemporary realities in the Niger Delta. And then it's a video that indicts, Shell, how Shell has, been playing games, with cleaning up the Niger Delta, despite the fact that there is abundant evidence that there has been spills, thousands of oil spills, in that region for decades.
The devastation of a major oil spill.
Can you hear the sound?
Yeah, it sounds good, Rotimi.
All right, thank you.
In the Niger Delta. Anywhere else in the world, you'd expect an urgent cleanup, some serious effort to reduce environmental damage. This happened 3 years ago, yet little has been done. And this is what the people of Bodo are left with now. Shell has operated in the Niger Delta since the 1950s and maintains 90 oil fields there. It finally admitted legal liability last month for this spill and another nearby, but compensation negotiations could drag on. People have already lost their livelihoods, with fishing stocks wiped out. This man used to be a fish farmer. He's now nearly destitute.
When I came there, we discovered that it was beyond my imaginations. The whole of this place was full of mangrove all over, as you see. They were all green like this.
And this woman used to collect periwinkles. She shows how they should be and how polluted they are now. Shell says in a statement, Shell is committed to clearing up oil spills regardless of their cause, but the security situation is such that it is very difficult to address the problems of Bodo. Amnesty International rejects this reasoning. It's been campaigning on behalf of people living in the area and filmed this footage on its last visit in May.
People can't fish, they can't earn a living. People have told us that their children are out of school because they can't afford to pay the fees or the associated costs. Food prices have risen locally because fish has to be brought in from other areas. People are very worried about their health. So it's a devastating environmental impact that's had a knock-on impact on a range of human rights.
These are familiar images in the Niger Delta, and it's estimated the lives of 69,000 people have been blighted because of the spills. Amnesty says it isn't the first environmental tragedy in the Delta, and it won't be the last. Andrew Simmons, Al Jazeera. The devastation.
Sorry. Yeah, from that video, we saw some of the health implications and environmental implications of unattended oil spills that have happened in the Niger Delta region in Nigeria, and how both governments and multinational oil companies have continued to abandon their duties to clean up the region. In fact, oil spills have become a common occurrence with thousands of incidents reported over the decades, and they have devastating consequences. But then, still talking health impacts, this is one of the books that I've worked on before now, that I've used in my research, Elon Abila, Oil and Water. It's a book that describes, although it's a literary text, but then it describes, the environmental situation of the Niger Delta region. And this excerpt, speaks to, the impact such degradation has on the health of the marginalized communities there. And here we can listen to the doctor, talking here. So, well, I did my duty as their doctor. I told them of the dangers that accompany that quenchless flare, but they wouldn't listen. And then a year later, when the livestock began to die and the plants began to wither on their stalks, I took samples of the drinking water, and in my lab, I measured the level of toxins in it. It was rising steadily. In 1 year, it had grown to almost twice the safe level. Of course, the people didn't listen. They were still in thrall to the orange glare. So this describes, the first few years, when oil multinational companies, started flaring gas in the Niger Delta region. And we can see how, innocent these people were, and how gullible at the same time, that they would use the flare, from the gas to bake their, what we call in the local parlance in Nigeria, what we call cocoa gari. Gari is from cassava. It's like a tapioca. So they're using the flare, the heat from the flare, to bake it. But then the life expectancy, in this community and other communities, doing all of this is very short. But then we can talk about, the environmental cost. We talk about the degradation happening. But then do we have, successful or examples of successful resistance at the communities, coming together to resist this degradation that is happening? So that's what we'll be talking about, in a moment. Now, communities in the Niger Delta, endure profound challenges, as they strive to uphold their dignity amidst severe environmental degradation caused by extraction industries. And despite these adversities, there is an urgent call for recognition and protection of human rights in the Niger Delta. The people of this region seek environmental justice, they seek fair treatment, they seek meaningful involvement in decision-making processes regarding natural resources that directly impact their life. And environmental justice advocates emphasize the right of communities to a clean and safe environment, to equitable access, to resources and protection against exploitation by multinational companies, and at times by even governmental policies that have consistently prioritized, profit over people. Now, one of the icons of, resistance in the Niger Delta is Ken Saro-Wiwa. Now, Ken Saro-Wiwa was a writer, an academic, an environmental campaigner. He was born in 1941, and he was, executed in 1995 because of his struggle, against Shell and the Nigerian government at that time. And he wrote many books, that became globally known, but he was famous, for championing the cause of his own people, the Ogoni people. The Ogoni people, they are a group of their nationality in Rivers State, Nigeria, in the Niger Delta region, and he formed a movement together with some people among the Ogonis. He formed the movement called the Survivor for, the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, MOSOP. But then in 1995, General Sani Abacha, who was the head of state in Nigeria at that time, in collusion with Shell, they tried him, they accused him and some others, about 8 other people, of being responsible for the murders of 4 prominent Ogoni leaders, and they killed them despite international intervention, despite outcry from the international community that they were not the one who killed them. But General Sani Abacha at that time ordered that they be executed, and they were executed. But then one of his quotes, speaks to my purposes, in this lecture. And this is what it says. So the most important thing for me is that I've used my talents as a writer to enable the Ogoni people to confront their tormentors. I was not able to do it as a politician or a businessman. My writing did it, and it sure makes me feel good. I'm mentally prepared for the worst, but hopeful for the best. I think I have the moral victory. And I said this when he was incarcerated, and he had been sentenced to death. That was when he made, these statements here that we have here. But then the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people, as a group that stands for resistance, for resilience, and for resisting these tormentors. They formed, or they came up with the Ogoni Bill of Rights, in 1990. In 1990, so they issued the Ogoni Bill of Rights. This is a historic document that highlighted the devastating effects of oil exploration on the Ogoni environment. And Mosop's resistance, reflects broader struggles in the Niger Delta, where indigenous communities fight not only corporate exploitation, but also for recognition and agency within the Nigeria state. So by advocating for political and environmental justice, Mosop continues to serve as a symbol of resistance, community resilience, and the ongoing fight for self-determination. Now we have a number of items here that they wanted: political control of Ogoni affairs by Ogoni people, the right to control and use a fair proportion of Ogoni economic resources for Ogoni development, adequate and direct representation as of right in all Nigerian national institutions, and the use and development of Ogoni languages in Ogoni territory, the full development of Ogoni culture, the right to religious freedom, and the right to protect the Ogoni environment and ecology from further degradation. That some of the things contained in the Bill of Rights from Mosop, which was founded by Ken Saro-Wiwa at that time. But then the struggle between oil extraction and indigenous ontologies can be seen as a struggle between modernity with indigenous ontologies. Modernity, is a one-word paradigm. Right? Modernity, says the word, such a way that you separate humanity from the natural world, right? It often promotes a universal framework, a singular universal framework of knowledge grounded in what it terms progress and rationality. And what that framework does is to dismiss or marginalize alternative epistemologies. So when oil exploration takes place, where it takes place all over the world, it is not just the resource that is being exploited. It is the indigenous ontologies of the people, because definitely oil exploration, as we've come to know, always leads to displacement. Extraction leads to displacement. And when displacement happens, you're displacing not just the people, their history, their culture, everything they stands for. And, their worldview, their epistemologies is being displaced. And that's what happens in the case of, the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Now, indigenous ontologies emphasize the deep connection between people, between their land and nature, and they view all of these as being interconnected and interdependent. They do not see one apart from the other, but they are seen to be connected and to be dependent on a chain of relationship. Now, these worldviews are crucial for sustainable practices for environmental stewardship, and they offer holistic solutions, to the challenges posed by extraction and modern development. And like I said earlier on, extraction industries disrupt the relational ontologies of indigenous communities. They sever the people from their cultural, spiritual, and environmental relationships. And these are things that are very important, in connecting indigenous people to their ecosystems. Now, going back to oil and water, Ellen Abila's oil and water, I also have an excerpt that I think, speaks to the struggle between modernity and, indigenous ontologies. And I'll also read out the excerpt from here. So it said the land was so polluted that even the water in the wells turned red. That was when priests from different shrines got together and decided to build this shrine by the river. The land needed to be cleansed of blood and pollution. And what of the sculptures? The sculptures came later. As the priesthood grew, some became specialists in mud and wooden figures. These figures represent the ancestors watching over us. They face the east to acknowledge the beauty of the sun rising. For without the sun, there will be no life. And some face the west to show the dying sun the way home and to welcome the moon. And each day, the worshippers go in a procession to the river to bathe in it, to cry to it, and to promise never to abominate it ever again. And did that help? Did the rivers return to normal? Yes. And ever since, we have managed to keep this island free from oil prospecting and other activities that contaminate the water and lead to greed and violence. You see how these people, strive to maintain ecological balance, and social harmony through their epistemology, the way they see the world, and the cultural and the rituals that they do. But then, big question that I'm asking, in this talk is, can we bring attention to other places where other types of extraction are taking place? For example, can we read land reclamation, happening in other places, say Lagos, as an extractive practice? And that also leads to another question: why Lagos? Why Lagos? Now, Lagos is a very important city in Nigeria. Right from the colonial period, even before the colonial period, right from the slave period or the slave trade era. Lagos has always been strategic. Has always been very important, even to that that kind of trade at that time, because of the fact that Lagos is surrounded by water. And the rapid urbanization and land reclamation practices in Lagos, driven by high-stakes development projects such as the Eco-Atlantic City, underscore a critical need for comprehensive study. And these practices rooted in extractive activities, like sand mining and dredging, mimic traditional resource extraction industries, and bringing with them, severe ecological and social consequences. So the reclamation of land from vital coastal waters and wetlands not only destroys ecosystems that support biodiversity and act as a natural defenses against flooding and erosion, it also exacerbates the displacement of indigenous and marginalized communities in Lagos. For example, local fishing communities and residents of vulnerable areas like Makoko, Okoafa, face the dual threats of losing access to crucial water resources and increasing susceptibility to environmental hazards. So this study on Lagos that I'm currently undertaking, is essential to understand how land reclamation reshapes urban and environmental landscapes, how it disrupts livelihoods and contributes to the growing environmental injustices faced by marginalized populations. And my aim is to investigate the broader implication of such extractive practices on biodiversity, environmental resilience, and community stability, providing insight into the socio-ecological costs that accompany high-value real estate development. And through this lens, The study will contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of urban development's impacts, informing policies that balance economic ambitions with ecological sustainability and social equity. Now, here's a map of Lagos. Now, to put this in perspective and for us to understand what I'm talking about. Now, Lagos can be divided into two. We can talk about Lagos mainland and Lagos Island, right? So there are many communities around Lagos mainland that are close to the Lagos Lagoon. And these communities, are being washed away because of the fact that in 1992, when the current president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was the governor of Lagos State, you initiated, the a land reclamation, that would lead to the building of a city in Lagos known as the Eco-Atlantic City. Eco is the indigenous name of Lagos. Lagos is actually a name from the Portuguese given, to that state and that city, in Nigeria. So I'm concerned, about, the communities around, Lagos mainland, especially, who are very close to Lagos Lagoon, and the impact, of this land reclamation that is going on these vulnerable communities. So projects like the Eco-Atlantic City, although symbolizing economic progress, have displaced vulnerable populations and disrupted Lagos' natural hydrology, intensifying socioeconomic and environmental inequalities. And we also have rising sea levels, climate pressures that disproportionately impact Lagos poorest communities, exacerbating access issues to clean water, to flood protection and secure land. I have a 1 minute, I think 1 minute or a little above 1 minute, video about buildings in Eco-Atlantic City that I want to share. I'm sorry. So the land on which this beautiful city, Eco-Atlantic City, which is beautiful, undeniably, it's built on is a land reclaimed from the ocean. And now, while you're trying to solve a problem, creating problems for defenseless and vulnerable populations, in Lagos, in communities in Lagos. And, let's hear from some of these people, who are affected by this land reclamation project, resulting in the building of Eco-Atlantic City.
Along this Atlantic coastline, entire communities are being swept away. Here in Lagos, more than 180 kilometers of the coast has been taken over by the ocean, most of it in the last decade. Officials here say the problem is accelerating at a frightening pace.
We have, I would say, about 15.5 kilometers of groins in place, which is one of the things we're putting in place to deal with the current, the imbalance of the wind, wave, and current. In that case, we've only been able to cover a distance of about, in total, I would say about 15.5 kilometers. And we have a total of 180 kilometer stretch.
Climate change is blamed for some of it, but man-made problems like sand mining and illegal reclamation of land from the ocean are also making coastal erosion worse. Over the past 2 decades, community leaders in Falcon say they lost 90% of their land.
If we look the bad, there is no more land for us to move into because the remaining property there belongs to Chevron Nigeria Limited.
Community leaders say the beach used to be 2 kilometers away from here, and that was just 10 years ago. Since then, they've moved 4 times and resettled inland. And now a new beachfront is being formed where houses used to be just a few years ago.
Lagos is home to more than 20 million people, living on just 3,300 square kilometers. As its population increases, there is a rush for land and sand for construction. The Atlantic Ocean and its beaches here are the targets.
After they brought a boat to mine sand, the erosion and encroachment got worse. That's how we got into bigger trouble.
A bigger worry for Nigerian coastal communities is the overlapping jurisdictions of federal and state governments on access to natural resources. Each wants exclusive rights. Environmentalists want an immediate ban on the exploitation of coastal areas. Unless that is done, they say Nigeria's most populous state may soon run out of space to accommodate its growing population. Ahmed Idris, Al Jazeera, Alpha Okun, Lagos, Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much. We can see, that there's enough evidence that, these things are happening in Lagos. And we still have, proof that it's not just a contemporary thing. It's something, that has its place in history, in colonial history of Lagos. The British colonial authorities at that time, they also, reclaimed the land from the ocean, and they were trying to construct, what they call stone moles, to facilitate ship movement and, into Lagos Harbor and to protect, dredge entrance. So it's just a colonial thing that, even in post-colonial societies that we continue to celebrate. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Just one moment, please. Yeah, because of our time. So the question again that I'm asking is, how might researchers like myself, work with these affected communities? I'm asking this audience tonight to help me think through community engaged research methods, that I can use as I plan to go to Lagos in the summer, to speak to these communities, interview them and collect data, and work with them. I'll also be doing archival work in Lagos when I go. But the question is, how, might researchers like myself work with these communities? And what can community engaged research do? How do we engage community engaged research? How do we listen to the community's rhetoric of resilience, resistance, and regeneration? And again, I'm interested in doing community engaged research, as this is an approach that emphasizes collaboration with local communities, throughout the research process. And it ensures that research is grounded in the lived experiences of those most affected by environmental challenges. And key elements of, community engaged research will be building partnership, empowerment and agency, and also, ethical considerations. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. But then, while I'm still in San Antonio, at UTSA, I've benefited from the Urban Bed project, a project that is being funded by the Mellon Foundation. And last spring, I was an Urban Bed scholar. And, during that time, and even I'm still working with Urban Bed project up to now, so I've been exposed to, community engaged research. And what we do is to work with indigenous communities in South Texas, and in Mexico. Some of our team members they've gone to Mexico, to work with indigenous communities over there. But then from time to time, we do work with indigenous communities in San Antonio here, to monitor biodiversity, to track environmental changes, and to advocate for habitat protection. And I believe this approach can be adapted to also monitor environmental damage, caused by extraction industries, whether it is oil extraction or whether it is land reclamation, type of extraction that is going on in Lagos. And also have a continuum of engagement possibilities, when one is doing community engaged research. Starting with, providing information and services, consulting, get information or feedback from the community, then involving community participation on specific issues, then collaborating with them, forming partnerships with the community on each aspect of a project. Yeah, sometimes from development to completion. That may not be too easy, but then it's not impossible to involve the community when one does community engaged research. And it's also, expected that we form strong partnership structures, among participating entities, whether with the researcher and members of the community. Then we also have, some principles of community engagement that can help researchers, who are working with communities, and vulnerable communities here. We want to be clear about the purposes of engagement and the populations the researcher wishes to engage. Then become knowledgeable, about the community. We want to establish relationships, want to carry out collective self-determination. You allow the community to carry out, to be self-determined and to, give you access to what they want to give you access to. But then partnership, like we said before now, is necessary to create change, in the community. But then another thing that is very important is recognizing and respecting the diversity, of the community. If one wants to succeed in working with, such communities, then also want to mobilize community assets and develop community capacity to take action. Then release control of actions and be flexible to meet changing needs. And collaboration also requires long-term commitment, with community members. Now, how can I apply, community engaged research to address environmental impacts in Lagos or elsewhere? Can use GIS mapping and environmental monitoring. And then again, one thing that Urban Bed project, exposed to me to is digital repository and how that can be used as a research methodology, especially when you're working with communities. And if one wants to use digital repository as a research methodology, at the level of data collection and preservation, one can work with, community members in storing archival environmental data, including GIS maps, including images, reports and community input, ensure that all collected data is safely preserved for long-term use and accessible for further research or policy making. Then the repository can also serve as a platform for community members to contribute data, such as localized environmental observations or traditional knowledge, enhancing participatory research. And we can also, make the repository accessible to the public. So if we do that, then that allows for transparency, enabling communities, policymakers, and researchers to use the data for environmental monitoring, advocacy, and education. That's the case, maybe. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe I didn't use the most updated slide, but the last slide there says, thank you very much, for giving me the opportunity to talk. And I also have my email address on it, but I don't know why I cannot find it here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. We're running a little bit late on time, so I'm just going to open the floor up for questions for Dr. Ogungbemi. Looks like Joseph Garcia had a question.
Could we maybe deactivate screen share so we can see everybody?
Oh, I'm sorry, forgot.
Thank you.
Oh, stop sharing. All right.
All right, Joseph, if you wanted to ask.
Dr. Ogungbemi, thank you very much. Fascinating. I mean, I'm very interested in Nigeria and Shell because of, I'm from Corpus Christi. I know San Antonio well. I grew up in the oil industry in the Texas coast, and I've been to West Africa. I've been to Guinea-Conakry and Dakar, Senegal, and Morocco, and seen what the French did to Guinea-Conakry specifically. And I wanted to ask, I also put all their information there in terms of what you were just talking about. I just interviewed to be the program coordinator for the Bullard Center for Climate and Justice that has a $50 million grant to do EJ projects in the surrounding EPA Region 6 areas, Louisiana, Arkansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas. So for community groups, so something that you should be aware of, especially there in Texas, being near the Bullard Center and Texas Southern University at Houston. But my question to you is what connections to greater environmental, for example, I'm very familiar with the case in Ecuador of Chevron, Texaco, and the way they just completely destroyed the jungle. And then the attorney, Donziger, was recently in house arrest. They've destroyed his career because he won the case in Ecuador. So back to, is there connections between Nigeria and other places around the world? Solidarity. But then I'm also fascinated in terms of the role of Boko Haram in Nigeria, as well as the recent coups in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, and what dynamics are happening right now in terms of the pressure from, let's say, the Sahara on Nigeria. Thank you for your presentation. Amazing.
Thank you very much. Now, talking about the connection between Nigeria and elsewhere where such things are happening. I can only say at this time about Nigeria. For Nigeria, I think although there is resistance, but because of the complicity of the Nigerian government, be it the military head of state or the current democratic government that we're practicing in Nigeria, little progress has been made. After the death of Ken Saro-Wiwa, the kind of resistance that Nigeria has experienced has been more of militancy, in terms of violent resistance. These people in the Niger Delta region, they become very violent, in trying to resist the oil multinational companies and even the Nigerian government. And it has brought further displacement, of people. But then there are still organizations, like Friends of the Earth, what is other international organizations? There are organizations that are really, trying to engage the Nigerian government, trying to engage Shell. There are court cases. Because now what the multinational companies are trying to do is to sell off those companies and run away. So, and they don't want to be responsible, for clearing these pills. So they want to sell their businesses and go away. So now that is where we are right now. They're trying to stop them from selling the businesses so that they are held responsible, for what they've done. And now going to the second question, It's scary because we were once there, you know, we thought the military guys would be our savior. So when it came that, oh, we won't have to deal with politicians. But Nigeria experienced military rule for almost 30 years, and that took us back to maybe 30 years before. So now seeing neighboring countries, you know, embracing military again, the military government again. A protest happened in Nigeria about 2 months ago, and it became very scary because in those protests in northern Nigeria, they started flying the Russian flag, calling on President Putin, you know, to come save us from our democracy. And that's a very, you know, serious sign that all is not well in that region, in West Africa right now. So there was a serious clampdown on those guys who were doing that. But then that shows that there's a serious problem in West Africa. So we can go back to military regime, especially considering, you know, the different policies introduced by the present president and how life has become very difficult for average Nigerians.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
I wanted to respond, if it's okay, to your question. You asked how, and of course, we can't condense all of this in 5-10 minutes, but you asked, how can you engage with these affected communities when you return this with your research? And it strikes me that your work is resisting epistemic injustice. You're doing this deep research, and I'm wondering if I was so moved by your story about the Ogungbemi people who engaged in ceremony and returning to the water and creating shrines. And I'm wondering if there is a way in your response to help restore Indigenous ontologies and epistemologies through your efforts in resisting epistemic injustices, and honoring those wisdoms, those worldviews, and helping restore that cultural fabric as you address the environmental impacts. It strikes me that you were looking at the principles of community engagement. And I don't know if you're familiar with appreciative inquiry as a modality of community engagement, but it's a way of bringing community into conversation to help them restore and articulate their own visions, their own knowledge systems, as you bring in your wisdom and your knowledge and your findings into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klaus.
So this is a powerful, powerful presentation, very moving, very, very deep, and incredibly complex. And I just so appreciate your insights and bringing it into our consciousness.
Thank you.
Rotimi, I was wondering if you could talk through a little bit of your time in Lagos and how your experience there has informed your own personal networks, your own sense of sort of the landscapes that are you're thinking of to engage, and also some of the communities there. How are you beginning to draw from that experience in order to, as Michelle said, sort of go back now with this research framework in mind? Do you have personal contacts with some of these communities? Do you have friends, etc., that can help you engage with them?
Yes, I have personal contacts, you know, with at least Lagosians, let me put it that way. I've lived in Lagos for a short time, but then we're in the same, we are the same people, the Yoruba people, you know, the Yoruba own Lagos, and I'm a Yoruba man. But then because of the creation of states, so we're no longer together. So I'm in Ondo State, but then they're just like 2 hours drive, you're in Lagos, So, but I have friends, I have families, I have contacts, and I've started making contacts, with people in Lagos, that can help me facilitate meetings with maybe community leaders, in some of these communities that are affected. There are a number of communities there. One that is that I'm particularly interested in is the one called Makoko. Yeah, Makoko is likened to Venice in Italy. It's called a floating city in Lagos now. So people they live on water, and from time to time they experience flooding, but then it has continuously, grown worse in recent times because of, all these activities, land reclamation that's happening in Lagos, and even the effect of climate change, is beginning to, really affect these ones. But I understand the terrain very well. I know Lagos. I speak the language. I know the culture. So I think it will be easy for me, going there. But then I still need to engage more with people, who live in those communities and who can, facilitate my access into those communities. Usually thinking that I'm not going to stay there for 1 year or 6 months, to really engage them. I'll just be going there in the summer, and within that short time, I need to do something that is worth it, that is worth the journey and the risk.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And what we largely know from community engaged research, right, especially with communities on the front lines of these climate impacts. And I know just from speaking to you that Lagos is this mega city that is truly going to face multiple climate impacts all at the same time. Don't be surprised when you find those communities are on, are on the leading edge of inventing ways of being, ways of doing, ways of knowing with water. So I'm super intrigued with Michelle's point and some of your drawings from oil and water, that those ontologies are likely still there and existing within these extreme conditions. And often communities are way ahead of academics and researchers or politicians and policies on how to live with these changes, because they're doing it every day. And I'm just really want to complement the sort of frameworks that would lead from policy down to the community level. Don't be surprised when the communities have better ideas than some of the policies and politicians. And so more than anything, just an encouragement to listen and to thank you for making those connections and drawing on those spaces and those communities to help us think through these impacts too. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might jump in, I am so moved by your courage and your commitment, and that can't be under celebrated or acknowledged for your work. And we are very eager to hear about your research when you return, and keep those connections open. And of course, hear about your work when we're at RSA in Portland in 2026. So these are big questions, big issues. We are straight up 5 o'clock. If there are any other questions or comments, we would. Oh, there's a recommendation that we have a listserv for these for our future talks. I think that's a fantastic idea. This colloquia series has been very grassroots, and we've just been very much word of mouth, coming out of my own courses and work in my Department of Chicano Studies. But we certainly could do that if you would put your email, if you haven't been on a direct email list, in the chat. So Jasmine Poblano, who is our coordinator for the event, can be sure that we can put together a listserv and an email list with everybody that's here. So our next event will feature Dr. Mariah Gomez, who has done extensive work on the impacts of the Manhattan Project here in New Mexico. And her work on nuclear New Mexico will be on Friday, November 15th at 4 o'clock. So we would very much invite everyone to please join us for this event with, and it's a wonderful follow-on on the work that you are doing. So deep appreciation, and we honor all the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mom. Thank you all for coming and for your insightful comments and encouragement. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Very
you, Michelle, for
inspiring.
organizing. Thanks, Rotimi.
Thank you so much.
Okay, have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jasmine. Can we capture the emails in the chat right now?
Yeah, I just took a screenshot right
Okay, great. Carolina, Assis, Joseph's on our list. Kenneth Walker is also new to us. Great. Anybody else? I'm scrolling really quick. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This-
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Your presentation is mind-blowing.
Thank you.
All the work you're doing, just layers and layers. I look forward to reading your book. You're going to have a very impactful book.
Thank you so much.
One of the challenges I know for this work is getting that information and that knowledge that you're building back to the community itself. And that's a project that I feel very committed to. So please stay in touch, and we'll hopefully see you before May of 2026, but very likely it will be May of 2026 in Portland. And
Yeah.
definitely want Jasmine to join us for that event and she share her work.
That would be nice. Are you going for the next year Summer Institute, RSA Institute?
I'm not, no. Are you going to go? Are you going?
Yes,
Where's it gonna be?
I applied, but I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm
Where will it be? Do you know?
Cincinnati.
Oh, Cincinnati. I'll pass. It's humid. Take care. Have a good weekend. And thank you. We had a really wonderful event. Very impactful work. And
Thank
it's
you.
wonderful partnering with UTSA and your faculty too.
Thank you.
So,
Bye, man. Bye, Jasmine.
blessings to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.